What's up, everybody? It's Coach Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Overwatch video. And in this video, we're going to be breaking down how to find your perfect main in Overwatch 2. With a comprehensive role and hero breakdown, you'll know by the end of this video exactly what hero best fits your playstyle and where you should go from here in Overwatch 2. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Whether you're brand new to Overwatch or you're returning for the first time in a long time and everything is different, it can be incredibly daunting to find your main in a giant roster of heroes, but I'm here to help. Now, if you're a true new player, you're gonna have to go through that first time user experience and unlock every hero slowly over the course of approximately 100 games. And I know while this does seem kind of tedious, I highly recommend you try every hero at least once. Not just for the experience, because it's great to learn the abilities and what every single character can do. That's going to make you much better when you finally decide on your main and you're playing against these characters. But it's also fun to just play all these characters, and you never really know if you're not going to find that perfect fit if you don't try them out one time. Maybe you'll surprise yourself and find a character you really enjoy. Now, that being said, after you break that ice and you want to start improving quickly, specialization is the key to fast improvement. I want you to think about trying to go pro in a sport. Let's say it's basketball. Now, if you're trying to go pro in that sport, would you play a little bit of maybe football? Would you play some tennis? Would you go and do a million other things? Probably not. You would want to spend the majority of your time focusing on that one sport that's going to make you the best at that sport. Unfortunately, none of us can be like Bo Jackson, and we gotta specialize. Focusing into a role will allow you to reach much quicker results and improvement in that role. Furthermore, it's better to focus on a small hero pool and truly learn them with the intent to master. Think about the amount of time you're spent playing the game. The more and more characters and roles you play, the more you divide your time, and you need a critical mass of time in a very select number of heroes to truly reach that mastery status. But remember, this is only after you broke that initial ice where I said try every character and learn every single character at least a little bit. Now let's dig into the actual roles themselves. First off, with the tank, characterized by high health pools and a CC plus ult charge reduction passive, meaning that you're going to be harder to crowd control or be forced to be displaced or moved around the map, and you're going to generate the enemy less ult charge when they deal damage to you. Now, the tank role is primarily centered around creating space, and it's very important for you to understand what that means. So what is space? Well, space is the areas on the map that you want to occupy, heal from, deal damage from, and control. Whether it's a balcony, the objective, or any area on the map, that is the space that you want to claim and create for your team by playing a tank. With a large pool of health and armor, that CC reduction and ult charge reduction, tanks can fill a space without dying instantly. Unlike squishies who would die very quickly if they ever walked out into the open with no resources, tanks can forcibly occupy a space, and they have more time to move from one area through the open into another that has cover, and because of their large health pools, they can get healed up and sustain a certain amount of damage while they brute force their way to take these areas. Now, you might be thinking, this seems like a pretty important role. Well, you would be absolutely correct, because it's actually the most important individual role in the entire game. There's only one per team, and a tank can dictate everything about the game. Without a good tank, a team could be lost with no direction and very little map control. If they're pushed, they have to just back away, and they can never stand their ground, and it makes contesting and pushing objectives incredibly difficult. This makes the tank role one of the best carry roles in the entire game, and if you're a god tier tank, you're going to carry game after game everyone in your backpack. Now, there are currently 10 tank heroes, with more going to be added periodically. Each one is going to be very different from one another, and I'll say that there are different tank types. So there's tanks that are more brawly, aka they're okay with playing more on the front line, and they do like to get in on that action. Reinhardt, Orisa, and Zarya are some examples of these characters. These are characters that are going to be more favored towards players that really want to have tons of presence on the field. Each of these characters have powerful CC related ultimates, crowd control ultimates that can have a huge impact, capable of being the central force for your team. Now, there are some characters that are a little bit more specialty. They typically want to play a little bit outside of the front line. Like they're playing a little bit back from the front line and they systematically press advantage with their resources and their abilities. Characters like Sigma, Roadhog, and Junker Queen. Sigma gets to play at that optimal range where he gets to shield his team and himself, kinetic grass to absorb damage, and poke enemies down with his primary fire. He has a great ultimate that can be team winning, but he's not really a character that wants to push up and be body to body with the enemy. He wants to maintain that optimal distance. Roadhog is a character that typically wants to play off of his hooks, looking for picks and opportunity. And Junker Queen is a character that can kind of do the brawl thing, but she also has a certain amount of favorability to playing with her team, with her rally. And I want you to take note here that while these are kind of loose boxes, a lot of these characters can be played in different play styles. So this is more of a rough guide rather than a actual die-hard box that I'm putting these characters in. Last up, we do got to talk about mobility-based characters. Winston, Diva, Wrecking Ball, Doomfist. These are characters that are going to have high amounts of mobility, and they're going to be able to use that mobility to accomplish many different things. Whether that means diving onto the enemy, favorable with the dive composition, getting on top of an enemy, and deleting them before moving on to the rest of the comp. They also have high mobility that could enable a peel-based strategy, like Diva, for instance, who could easily contest enemies on the high ground or fly back to her team and save them with her defense matrix. Now, there are some general characterizations that I wanted to talk about with these heroes. First off is shields. Not every character is going to have a shield, and some characters that do are characters like Sigma, Rhine, Orisa, for instance. And shields are powerful because they are an artificial form of cover, meaning your team can shoot through it, but the enemy can't shoot back. This makes it easier to occupy open space, especially with the help of a character behind you that can deal damage through your shield. On top of that, shields can block a number of different abilities and ultimates, meaning that they have tons of versatility and they're very powerful. Next up is crowd control. These are abilities that force movement or a lack of movement on the opposition, and the majority of crowd control is given to the tank role. These are things like stuns, pulls, boops, or things that hold people into place, like Graviton Surge. Crowd control is one of the most effective ways to force an enemy to stop moving, and there's so many characters that have that mobility that make them very hard to kill. And on top of that, when enemies stop moving and don't have any way to get away, it's very easy to focus them down and kill them. Now, some tanks are going to be better at certain things than others. Knowing your main weakness is also just important as knowing your strengths as well. Now, some tanks will require higher levels of mechanical skill. So even if you're a player that comes from a tactical FPS or an ability shooter, you can find a very mechanically demanding tank that will still utilize a ton of what you've learned from past games and a ton of your skill from past games. But if you're someone that comes from the MOBA genre and you want to find something that requires more brain rather than aim, there's a ton of characters that do that as well. Characters like Reinhardt, for instance, or Winston. These are characters that don't require raw aim, but rather proper timing and ability usage and overall game sense. So you can find something that fits you regardless of your history or what kind of skills you bring to the table. Now, next up, we got to talk about the DPS role, and there is currently 17 DPS heroes in Overwatch 2, each of which are very different from one another. While they are all put into the quote-unquote DPS category, they are actually splittable into subcategories. First off, let's talk about hit scan. And how hit scan works is the bullet registers on the crosshair lining up to the enemy. It's not like there's a travel time to the bullet. It's either you hit the shot or you miss the shot. Now, this is going to require precise mechanical aim, and there are a number of different characters that fit this criteria. Soldier, Cassidy, Widowmaker, even Bastion, and typically Ashe is put into the hit scan category, even though technically her primary fire is not a hit scan. It's a very, very fast moving projectile, but for all intents and purposes, it acts like a hit scan. Now, I use the term projectile, and what a projectile is a type of fire that has a timed shot, aka a travel time. In the real world, there is no such thing as a hit scan. Projectile is the only way that things actually travel through the air because everything that travels has a travel time. And there are a lot of characters that have varied different projectile speeds, like Pharah, Hanzo, Torb, Junkrat, Mei, Echo, and to an extent Sojourn, but Sojourn is a little bit of a weird case because her alternate fire is technically a hit scan fire. But the thing about projectiles that are way different from hit scan is rather than precisely hitting an enemy right on the head every time, every single shot has a percentage to hit. Because of the travel time, you don't necessarily know if the enemy's gonna move. You have to also alter your aim dependent on the travel time and enemies moving, which requires a form of prediction. And if we're talking about pro play or scrim play, typically players will fall into the hit scan category or the projectile / flex category because the needs are different, and it's unrealistic to expect someone that mains or plays Pharah and Torb to be able to easily swap to Widowmaker, requiring the precise specific aim that she requires. Now, there are other characters that I will put in like a flex specialty category, and it's a little bit strange because we have Tracer, Genji, and Sombra. While Tracer and Sombra are technically hit scan characters, they don't play like the majority of the other hit scans in the category because of their mobility. Tracer and Sombra are characters that are more likely to be all up in your face and divey, and oftentimes you'll find characters that specialize in these dive style characters, and while they do require aim to play well, it's not quite the same as the hit scan category, and there is a stark difference in a player that primarily mains characters like Cassidy, Widowmaker, and Soldier, and characters that primarily main Tracer and Sombra. In the same vein, Genji is technically a projectile, but for all intents and purposes, he doesn't quite play like the rest of the projectile class. Just because you're someone who prefers Hanzo doesn't necessarily mean that you'll naturally fit into playing Genji and vice versa. On top of that, Reaper is also a character that is technically hit scan, but because his bullets are actually just point blank, he doesn't play like any of the other hit scans. And then the true specialty is Symmetra, who is just very weird and different, much different from every other character in the role. She's still very powerful though. Now, what matters the most in choosing your DPS main is what style you want to play. Do you want to try to get picks and get pickoffs? Do you want to be a little bit untraditional and play something that's unique to only Overwatch? Do you want to dive, have advanced dueling, or require advanced mastery to get good at a character? Some characters will have crazy mobility, while other characters will play more of an attrition and pressure style. Some characters will also require that mechanical mastery, and others will require a huge brain. On top of that, mechanically, characters with large mobility favor higher sensitivities because you need to accomplish their sporadic movements. For instance, Genji will require you to do a ton of 180s on the fly, while some aim-centric characters can have a much more lower sensitivity because it's going to be more stable and they need to turn far less. I'll do a settings and sense guide in the future, so sub if you don't want to miss out on that, and I'll properly explain exactly what type of sensitivity you want to have if you want to optimize your character choice. Now, some of the roles and things that damage dealers are supposed to do, they're supposed to deal damage. That's the first one. While not every damage dealer is going to deal damage in the same way or have the same volume of damage, it's still important that damage dealers use damage as a form of pressure and a form of space creation, forcing enemies off high ground and optimal angles, because if they take damage, they have to retreat or go back behind cover. Otherwise, they're just gonna die. On top of that, picks are an important part of being a DPS player. Getting picks is a great way to actually get that numbers advantage, leading to far more team fights won. Different heroes will get picks in very different ways. Widowmaker's trying to look for that headshot, and maybe you'll even grapple up to try to find it. Genjis and Tracers will be on the flank, targeting the supports and trying to get that quick kill before getting away. And other characters will look to attrition down the enemy and slowly make them exhaust their resources until finally you get a pick off or you see an opportunity. Now, last but certainly not least, we need to talk about the support role. Now, supports currently have 8 choices in Overwatch 2, each with their unique strengths and weaknesses. While in the past, supports were split into a main and off support, that was primarily based on volume of healing and mechanical requirements, and with us going down to one tank, these classifications are a bit outdated because you simply don't require a huge volume of healing with only one tank to maintain. Well, we could classify them more in a different video. For now, let's just talk about them individually. Mercy, Zen, Brig, Lucio, Kiriko, Ana, Mura, and Baptiste. Now, the first thing that you need to understand about supports in general is that supports are not healers. None of them are healers, they are supports, meaning that your job is not purely to heal, it's to support your team, and in many ways, make plays as well. Now, I know what you might be saying. Mercy seems like a character that is primarily centered around healing. What do you mean I'm not a healer? Well, Mercy can heal, and she does heal. That's an important part of her job. She also has a job to enable her team. Mercy can damage boost and actually change the breaking points of a lot of different DPS. She can also peel for her team, healing them if they were being dived on, and then damage boost them so that they win the duel and you get a numbers advantage. Essentially, Mercy can apply an amplification of both heal, sustain, and damage at any moment with whoever she wants on the team. A Mercy that is properly optimizing people's impact across a battlefield can have a huge impact over the course of a game, and a lot of supports can do things in a similar vein. Now, some supports are going to require incredibly high mechanical mastery. Characters like Zen, for instance, require you to be very precise with a projectile-based fire, which we talked about earlier. Now, there are also supports that can be very, very difficult to master that require you to know tons about the game and be very mechanically good. Characters like Ana combine both hit scan and projectile fire, with her scope being hit scan and her alternate fire being projectile, and she has two abilities that require proper skill to execute, both of which are projectile fire at different speeds. So if you don't have skill to back up the character mechanically, it's going to be very hard for you to translate what you want to do into impact on the battlefield. On top of that, some supports have mobility while others require expert positioning. Characters like Kiriko, Lucio, and Mercy all have a get out of jail free card, while other supports like Brig and Ana and Zen are under the rule of their positioning, meaning that they can't get away if enemies dive on top of them, and it requires them to hit skill shots or properly position near their team or far away enough so that they're not easy targets. Now, some important things that supports can do is, for one, they have counter ultimates, or a lot of them do, meaning that they have ultimates that can deny enemies' ultimates. Think Zen's Transcendence or Lucio's Beat. These are things that can directly deny an enemy's impactful ultimate. So if you're in a Graviton Surge, for instance, which would normally end up in multiple kills for the enemy, this could be a great way to not only stop that ultimate, but flip the tide of the team fight. On top of that, they have peel, and I do know that I talked about peeling with the tanking category, but support peeling is a little bit different because it often tries to keep up an ally and enables them to fight their own battle rather than just simply going in and trying to kill the enemy or get them off your teammate. Oftentimes, in a very close fight between two DPS characters, for instance, a little bit of healing from you or a little bit of support from you can shift the tide in your teammates' favor, allowing them to win that fight. On top of that, supports are playmakers. Many of them have the capability to hugely impact the battlefield with a skill shot ability, for instance. Think on a nade, where if you nade an anti 3 or 4 people, none of them will be able to heal, and they'll all take a chunk of damage, meaning that your team can go in and clean up. And that's one skill shot ability that, with proper execution, could have a huge impact on the battlefield. Now, while this gives you a summary of every single role and what they need to accomplish, I want to make it clear that you don't need to pick your main so soon if you don't want to. While yes, specialization is the key to improving quicker, there's no reason that you have to be under a time crunch to get better, and oftentimes if you build that foundation up, try every character a substantial amount of time, build up that base knowledge, then you'll truly be able to discover who your main is and who best fits you without trying to brute force your way through, only for you to realize later on that you actually wanted to main a completely different kind of character. I do hope this video has taught you a thing or two, but if you have any questions, feel free to tell me down below and let me know what kind of video you want to see next, because I'm grinding out this content and I would love to make a video over any topic that you're confused on. please smash that like, subscribe, and I thank you for coming by. See you next time.